Hi, hello, and welcome friends. Ayeeelien here. We are back with another tutorial, and I wanted to talk about something a little familiar for all of us. We all know the concept of werewolves, the creatures that change into a wolf form in the night of a full moon and are vicious, awful, terrifying monsters, right? Well, I had a new concept. I wanted to take this werewolf and make it reversed. So what if there was a world where we're in our beast form all the time and humanity only occurs in brief glimpses? That's what I wanted to do today with this piece, and we are gonna dive into it. So let's get started. Before I did this painting, I started with a concept sketch because, not gonna lie, human hands are kind of difficult for me to draw, so I wanted to make sure that I had that kind of down and was confident with it before proceeding. But I made a howling wolf and I wanted the hands to rupture through the mouth. The easiest method I found works for me in regards to sketching hands is using the sticks and stones method. So I use sticks to draw the phalanges and stones, if you will, to draw knuckles, and that really helps for me to kind of break down the hand anatomy and give it a more proportionate perspective. So I kind of made a diagram here. Hopefully it kind of better explains my sketch process for hands, but that really helped me for this process with a lot of intricate finger bending and kind of odd contortions to the wrist. Now that we have our sketch worked out, I did decide to add a second hand just for some more pulling motion, but I'm taking my painter's tape and I'm masking off my foreground of the piece, being the wolf and the hands, just to better block it off and protect it from our paint layer to do the landscape. For the landscape, I wanted to do some kind of like evening sunset-y vibes in the forest, and I drew a circle at the very top for our full moon to be present, and for that I just traced a paint container and made a perfect circle with my pencil, and I'm going in with my blue starting at the front of the moon and then blending that out with a lavender, continuing to taper it and making a little bit of a setting kind of sky. I wanted to make this more of a forest concept, but I wasn't sure how to implement that initially, so I really focused on my skyline, added some clouds with my fan brush, went in and added some sparkles and some stars with my smaller thin acrylic paintbrush and made some tiny little dotting motions as well to make some sparkles. And then I went in and decided, finally, we're gonna make our forest. To start the base shade of the trees, I actually used maroon. I wanted to play with the very warm tones that we had with the setting skyline, so I used that to make a bunch of random long sticks, starting with a very thick base and tapering to the top using my bamboo brush, and then adding a couple of extended branches with my leftover maroon. I also go in and darken that a little bit with some black tempera, and then run my paintbrush up and down the bases to kind of give it the tree bark texture, and you do that by just making a bunch of squiggly worms and then kind of following those worms with more worms on top, and it over time kind of creates a tree barky texture. After that, I proceed to take a different shade of maroon, a lighter one, and move in and add tiny little sticks and branches just to thicken up our forest line and really give it some sharper brambles, give it some edges. I want to make the forest look a little rough, not super scary, but dense. Completing the final touches to the highlights and shadows on the full moon, we now get to focus on the leaves to our trees, and I'm going to use my fan brush and the maroon shade and just stipple back and forth, giving a bunch of light potential and gaps for the moon to be shown through, as well as the skyline details. I also take a little bit of mauve and stipple that at the bottom in some gray to give the floor a little bit of a background, and then peel off all of our paint tape protecting our wolf, and we can try to focus on getting the gray tones in for the fur. For the base, I wanted to make a warm tone gray, so I actually used my tempera in the shade Almond Cream and mixed that with my acrylic Liquitex Basics in the shade Neutral Gray, and I gave that a little bit of a warmer tone before coating that entirely over our wolf, starting with the muzzle and then working my way down. After that, still using my very thick bamboo brush, I slightly tinted that gray with a little bit of tempera black, lining the lips and further muscling, and just used that baseline gray, tinting it over time with more and more tempera black to build up depth and start to place those primary dark hairs. Keeping in mind, timber wolves, gray wolves have still a very red-brown tinge to their coat, so we are going to incorporate that later, but right now I really want to focus in on those silvery aspects to the fur. Also, as I continue to use my round brush to make our fur textures, I want to continue to emphasize the importance of understanding fur flow and structure in regards to the face and how fur moves across the body to add further volume. Fur never just moves in a single direction across the body. There's there's always going to be tinges of motion in the muscles and under the skin and as the animal kind of moves. So I really want to emphasize that. You can also add a lot of emotion and expression in the fur flow. So I really, really want to emphasize the importance of studying the face if you have any references. And back to the painting. So after blotching our almond cream tempera paint across all the areas where we're anticipating some warm hair growth, I then go in with my burnt sienna on a thin, rounded acrylic brush, and I sweep that through the fur, also combining that with a little bit of raw umber to kind of deepen it as we add layers to the coat and give it a little more depth. And then we start to fill in our snoot. The snoot, I am actually pretty confident with painting dog noses, so I didn't have too much difficulty with this step, but references are key if you're not familiar. Using the base of like a half mushroom slice is also a really good reference, and then using tiny dots to give some shading and some porous textures to the nose, as well as some glossy appearances in the final finish of it. Deepening the nostrils very last with my tempera black at the very center of it, being very minimal with my use of shading initially with it, just to make sure that we have some definition between the nose and the background. Shifting focus to the mouth of the wolf, I'm going to start by emphasizing the lip and deepening it with a carbon kind of gray, and then stippling a highlight through, and then focusing on the teeth. I wanted it to look really tartary, so I stuck with that almond cream, tinted it with a little bit of yellow tempera, and then lightened it with some acrylic white, and placed that as the base, and then lightened that up gradually with titanium white to give it a bit of a highlight. And then I want to emphasize and talk in some depth about our broken jaw. To make the bone shade different from the tooth shade, I actually used titanium white and tinted that with just a little bit of gray, and then on the inside of that, I'm going to go in with the almond cream and start to give it more of a bone marrowy, fresh shade. I tinted the fur around the broken jaw as well with some maroon and red to also give it some blood. I wanted this to look like an active transformation, and a painful one at that, as most werewolves tend to have painful transformations in film, so I wanted to kind of stick with that gore effect. Now that we're closing in on the halfway point with this piece, I wanted to go over why I was inspired to create it. So I was inspired to paint the Reverse Werewolf because I feel like modern day, the only thing that we see on the news is all the worst sides of humanity, and that seems to be the only thing that catches anyone's attention anymore, and we don't really highlight the kindness of our acts and us as a community. And I feel like by showing the predominant display of violence in our society, it's almost like a reverse werewolf, and we only see bleak moments of human kindness these days. And I want us to see and encourage more kindness and less of the encouraged attention to violence, you know? Getting into the hand section of the painting, I actually pre-tinted the hands with some of the maroon mouth shade just to have that preemptively in there, but I'm using our almond cream, a little bit of Naples yellow, and some raw umber to make our earthy tones for the skin. I'm using nothing but references and going back and forth for this step because hands were something that I didn't paint really until this piece, and I really wanted to lock in and be comfortable with that part of the human body to further paint portraits. So I really studied the hands here and defined every wrinkle with super finite titanium white, and highlighted using our pink shades and sticking more towards the peachy palettes for highlights and more towards the raw umbery tones for the shadows, definitely giving heavy shadows within the thumbs and the pointer fingers on the upper hand because it's kind of cascading, and I had to use my point of reference for the light as the full moon, so that really kind of helped to make a further stronger shadow cast. After being confident that my hands looked pretty good, I went ahead and went back through the fur with the rest of my titanium white on my paint plate and swept through and gave the fur some highlights before going in and finishing out the whisker details, giving a little more tint to the eyebrows and general shines to the tips of the fingers, the teeth, things like that, just last minute highlighting and giving further flow into the fur. I like adding those crisp, thin white lines of fur because it just adds extra glossiness to the coat and that thinness and sheerness to the fur. I also take thinned out tempera black and I put that through the base of the arms and wrist of the hands, kind of coming out of the mouth. I wanted to add further shadow there and a little bit into the lower jaw as well. I decided I wanted to add more movement into the piece. I know that we have the jaw breaking, the arms moving, but I also wanted to add some drips of saliva and some blood. So what I did was thin out some titanium white and primary blue tempera paint and made very, very light blue into tiny, tiny little smears and drops, and did the same thing with my tempera red, using multiple shades of pinks and whites and maroon to highlight and shadow the blood drops, and using dark blue and bright white to help kind of shadow the saliva lines as well, just to give it further depth, and drip that across the fingers, across the jaw, from the teeth, just everywhere to give it just ooey gooey motion. At this point, I realized I still had some watered down tempera black, and I went ahead and I used that to kind of stipple into the trees and give some further depth into the sticks and the general foresty area. I just wanted to use what paint I had left over. I don't like to waste product, so I just went back and added those last minute little details. And once we're happy with every last little detail, it's finally time for the most satisfying part, the tape peel. Gosh, I love this part so much when it doesn't rip my paper. It is so freaking nice, you guys. So I had to record it for you. I got you. Oh my god. Am I getting my first clean paint peel? Ah! You guys! This never happens. I'm so happy with switching to the wax tape so far. And I would like to give a huge thank you to all of my Twitch followers. Thank you so much for hanging out with me during this paint process and being able to kind of get a one-on-one chance to learn and hang out and just vibe as we create. So thank you. And if you ever want to join us on Twitch, here it is at the link below. So definitely check that out. Okay, you guys, she's officially ready. Are you ready to see it? Oh my goodness. It is so freaking cool. This painting took us a total of 3 days to finish, from sketch to finding our signature on the painting. I absolutely love every single detail. Thank you so, so much for hanging out with me, you guys. I hope you got at least 1 or 2 takeaways from today's tutorial. And oh my gosh, I forgot to mention, you guys, I got a store! So if you've ever been curious about how to get your paws on any of our really cool Faded Ayeelen designs, I have 2 shops. We've got our wearable merch and we've got our prints and canvases. So if that at all intrigues you, definitely check out my Printful and my Fourth Wall. Thank you so, so much for your support. I cannot wait to come at y'all with a new video and see what we create. I am so, so stoked about this art shop, and we will have new designs coming very, very soon. Thank you so, so much for all the love and support, you guys. You are absolutely amazing. I just didn't want to forget that I opened a store and I needed to tell you guys. Remember, my name is Faded Ayeelen here on YouTube and Twitch and all the other things. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Remember to stay safe, stay positive, and stay creative. I will see you next time. Bye, friends.